Hello Year 5, thank you for joining me for another chapter of The Breadwinner. We are on Thursday the 23rd of April. How many of you noticed the mistake I had yesterday? Yes, I did have the right day, but I put the wrong date. So I put Wednesday the 23rd. I definitely did that on purpose, just so that you could notice the mistake I'd made. It wasn't because I'm forgetting what days are on. It wasn't that at all. I definitely had done that on purpose. Anyway, we're on chapter 8 today. Before I start, there is a word in here that I even had to look up because I couldn't really remember what it had meant. So the word we've got is Karachi, and all it means is it's basically a cart on wheels that can be pushed. I couldn't really find an image of this, so I've kind of made up in my head what I think it looks like. Now, my class, I know you have missed my art so much because I'm such an amazing artist. I thought I'd show you what is in my head for this. Wonderful, isn't it? So I imagine it to be something like that, but of course, if you find a different image for it online, you'd be more than happy to share that with me so that I can share that with you all next time. But yeah, this is what I'm kind of envisaging with a Karachi. So there we go, and we will begin chapter 8. Mrs. Vera was back. "I'll be moving in this afternoon, Pavana," she said. "You can help me." Pavana wanted to get back to her blanket, but helping Mrs. Vera would be another change in routine, so that was fine with her. Besides, as long as Mrs. Vera was around, Mother seemed like her old self. "Mrs. Vera and I are going to work together," Mother announced. "We're going to start a magazine. So we'll all have our jobs to do. Noria will look after the little ones, your mother and I will work on our projects, and you will go out to work." Mrs. Vera declared as though she were assigning positions on a hockey field. "We'll all pull together." Pavana showed them the money she'd earned. "Wonderful," Mother said. "I knew you could do it." "Father would have made much more," Nuria said, then bit her lip as if she were attempting to bite back her words. Pavana was in a good mood to be bothered. After tea and naan for lunch, Pavana headed out with Mrs. Vera to get her belongings. Mrs. Vera wore the burqa, of course, but she had such a distinctive way of walking that Pavana was sure she would pick her out of the whole marketplace of women wearing burqas. She walked as though she were rounding up children who were dawdling after class. She walked swiftly, head up and shoulders back. Just to be safe, though, Pavana stayed close to her. "The Taliban don't usually bother women out alone with small children," Mrs. Vera was saying, "although you can't be too certain of that. Fortunately, I can probably outrun any of these soldiers. Outfight them too if they tangle with me. I've handled many a teenage boy in my teaching years. There wasn't one I couldn't reduce to tears without a good lecture." "I saw a Talib cry this morning," Pavana said, but her words were lost in the whoosh of air as they moved quickly through the streets. Mrs. Vera had been living with her grandchildren in a room even smaller than Pavana's. It was in the basement of a ruined building. "We are the last of the Veras," she said. "The bombs took some, the war took others, and pneumonia took the rest." Pavana didn't know what to say. Mrs. Vera did not sound as though she was looking for sympathy. "We have a loan of the Karachi for the afternoon," Mrs. Vera said. "The owner needs it back in the evening to go to work, but we'll manage it all splendidly in one trip, won't we?" Mrs. Vera had lost a lot of things too in the bombing raids. "What the bombs didn't get, the bandits did. Makes it easier to move though, doesn't it?" Pavana loaded a few quilts and cooking things into the Karachi. Mrs. Vera had everything packed and ready. "Here's something that they didn't get." She took a medal on a bright ribbon out of a box. "I won this in an athletics championship. It means I was the fastest woman runner in all of Afghanistan." The sun caught the gleaming gold on the medal. "I have other medals too," Mrs. Vera said. "Some have been lost, but some I still have." She sighed a little, then caught herself. "Enough recess, back to work." By the end of the afternoon, Mrs. Vera had been moved moved in and the Karachi had been returned. Pavana was too wound up from all the day's activities to sit still. "I'll get some water," she offered. "You? Offering to do something?" Nuria asked. "Are you feeling well?" Pavana ignored her. "Mother, can I take Mariam to the tap with me?" "Yes, yes, yes!" Mariam jumped up and down. "I want to go with Pavana." Mother hesitated. "Let her go," Mrs. Vera advised. "Pavana's a boy now. Mariam will be safe." Mother relented, but first she spoke to Mariam. "What do you call Pavana when you're outside?" "Kasim." "Good. And who is Kasim?" "My cousin." "Very good. Remember that and do what Pavana says. Stay right with her, do you promise?" Mariam promised. She ran to put on her sandals. "They're too tight." She started to cry. She hadn't been outside in over a year, Mother explained to Mrs. Vera. Of course her feet have grown. "Bring them to me and dry your tears," Mrs. Vera told Mariam. The sandals were plastic, all in one piece. "These will do for Ali soon, so I won't cut them. For today, we'll wrap your feet in cloth. Pavana will buy you proper sandals tomorrow. She should be out in the sunshine every day," she said to Mother, "but never mind. Now that I'm here, we'll soon have this family whipped into shape." She tried several layers of cloth around the child's feet. "The skin will be tender if she hasn't been outside in such a long time," she told Pavana. "Mind how you go." "I'm not sure about this," Mother began, but Pavana and her sister hurried out before she could stop them. Fetching water took a very long time. Mariam had seen nothing but the four walls of their room for almost a year and a half. Everything outside the door was new to her. Her muscles were not used to the most basic exercise. Pavana had to pull her up and down the steps as carefully as she had done to help Father. "This is the tap," she said to her sister as soon as they arrived. Pavana had walked a little ahead to smooth a pathway free of stones. She turned on the tap so that water gushed out. Mariam laughed. She stuck a hand in the flow, then snatched it back as the cool water touched her skin. She looked at Pavana, eyes wide open. Pavana helped her to do it again. This time she let the water flow over her. "Don't swallow any," Pavana warned, then showed her how to splash her face with water. Mariam copied her, getting more water on her clothes than her face, but at least she had a good time. One trip was enough for Mariam that first time. The next day, Pavana took Mariam's sandals to the market and used them as a guide to get a bigger pair. She found some used ones that a man was selling along the street. Every day after that, Mariam went to the water tap with Pavana, and bit by bit she started to get stronger. The days began to fall into a pattern. Pavana went out to the market early every morning, returned home from lunch, then went back to the market in the afternoon. "I could stay out there if there was a latrine I could use in the market," she said. I would want you to come home at midday anyway," Mother said. "I want to know that you are all right." One day, after she'd been working for a week, Pavana had an idea. "Mother, I'm seen as a boy, right?" "That's the idea," Mother said. "Then I could be your escort," Pavana said. "I could be Nuria's escort too, and you could both get outside sometimes." Pavana was excited about this. If Nuria got some exercise, maybe she wouldn't be so grumpy. Of course, she wouldn't get much fresh air under the burqa, but at least it would be a change. "Excellent idea," Mrs. Vera said. "I don't want you as my escort," Nuria said, but Mother stopped her from saying any more. "Nuria, Ali should go outside. Pavana is able to manage fine with Mariam, but Ali squirms so much, you'll have to hold on to him. You should get outside sometimes too, Fatana," Mrs. Vera said to Mother. Mother didn't answer. For Ali's sake, Nuria went along with the idea. Every day after lunch, Pavana, Nuria, Ali and Mariam went outside for an hour. Ali had been only a few months old when the Taliban came. All he really knew was the little room they had been shut up in for a year and a half. Nuria had not been outside either in all that time. They could walk around the neighbourhood until their legs got tired, then they would sit in the sunshine. When there was no one around, Pavana would keep watch, and Nuria would flip up her burqa to let the sun pour down on her face. "I'd forgotten how good it feels," she said. When there was no line up at the water tap, Nuria would wash the little ones right there to save Pavana having to carry that water. Sometimes Mrs. Vera was with them. Sometimes Mrs. Vera was with them with her grandchild, and all three children were washed at the same time. Business had good days and bad days. Sometimes Pavana would sit for hours without a customer. She made less money than her father had, but the family was eating, even though most days they ate just naan and tea. The children seemed livelier than they had in a long time. The daily sun and fresh air were doing them a lot of good, although Nuria said they were harder to look at after now in the room. They had more energy and always wanted to go outside, which they couldn't do when Pavana was out at work. At the end of each day, Pavana handed over all the money she had made. Sometimes Mother asked her to buy naan or something else on the way home. Sometimes, the times Pavana liked best, Mother would come with her to the market to shop for the family. Mrs. Vera's arguments had finally worn her down. Pavana liked having Mother all to herself, even though they didn't talk about anything other than how much cooking oil to buy or whether they could afford soap that week. Pavana loved being in the market. She watched people move along the streets, loved hearing snatches of conversation that reached her ears, loved reading the letters people brought her. She still missed Father, but as the weeks went by, she began to get used to him being gone. It helped that she was so busy now. The family didn't talk about him, but she heard Mother and Nuria crying sometimes. Once, Mariam had her nightmare and woke up calling for Father. It took Mother a long time to get her back to sleep. Then, one afternoon, Pavana saw her father in the market. He was walking away from her, but Pavana was sure it was him. "Father!" she called out, springing off her blanket and rushing after him. "Father, I'm here!" She ran into the crowd, pushing people out of her way, until finally she reached her father and threw her arms around him. "Father, you're safe! They let you out of prison!" "Who are you, boy?" Pavana looked up into a strange face. She backed away. "I thought you were my father," she said, tears rolling down her face. This man put his hand on her shoulders. "You seem like a fine boy. I'm sorry I'm not your father." He paused and then lowered his voice. "Your father is in prison?" Pavana nodded. "People are released from prison sometimes. Don't give up hope." The man went on his way into the market, and Pavana went back to her blanket. One afternoon, Pavana was about to shake out her blanket before going home when she noticed a spot of colour on the grey wall. She bent down to pick it up. It was a small square of embroidered cloth, no more than 2 inches long and 1 inch wide. Pavana had never seen it before. As she wondered where it had come from, her eyes went up to the blacked-out window, where she thought she had seen a flicker of movement a few weeks before. There was movement now. There was no movement now. The wind must have carried the little piece of embroidery to her blanket, although it hadn't been very windy today. She couldn't blame the wind a few days later, though, when she found a beaded bracelet on her blanket after work. She looked up at the window. It was open. It swung out over the wall of the house. Pavana walked closer to get a better look. In the narrow space, Pavana saw a woman's face. The woman gave Pavana a quick smile, then pulled the window shut. A few days later, Pavana was sitting watching the tea boys run back and forth between the customers and the tea shop. One of the boys almost collided with a donkey. Pavana was laughing and looking the other way when a tea boy tripped on something near her and spilled a tray of empty teacups all over the blanket. The boy sprawled in the dust in front of Pavana. She helped him gather the cups that had rolled away. She handed him the tray and saw his face for the first time. She let out a gasp and slapped a hand across her mouth. The tea boy was a girl from her class. And that is the end of chapter 8. So we are over halfway through the book now. Please make sure you look at your home learning template today to see what your activity is. And I'll see you tomorrow for another chapter. Goodbye.